You ever find yourself wanting the core of a truly fascinating story? The stuff that sticks with you without getting totally lost in a mountain of details.
Hmm.
That's exactly what we're doing today on the deep dive. We basically sift through the sources so you don't have to.
And today's deep dive takes us to a really dark corner of American history. The still unsolved Texarkana Moonlight Murders of 1946.
Yeah, for about 10 weeks in the spring of that year, February through May, this wave of terrifying attacks just gripped the Twin Cities, straddling the Arkansas-Texas border.
It's a chilling story, and we've got a pretty compelling set of sources to explore this. We'll be drawing on factual accounts from, like, the Encyclopedia of Arkansas and Wikipedia, just to get the timeline and the key details straight.
Right, establish the facts. And then we're adding a richer layer with this fascinating Texas Monthly article. It gives more of a narrative feel and really digs into the lasting impact.
So our goal here, our mission, if you like, is to extract the essential bits, the attacks, the atmosphere of fear in Texarkana, the main suspect who, well, got away with it, technically.
Yeah, never convicted of the murders.
Right. And just why this case is still unsolved, still talked about. Let's start at the beginning. That first really chilling night.
Okay, February 22nd, 1946. You've got a young couple, Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larray. They'd been to a movie, parked on this secluded road outside Texarkana, Texas. A typical lover's lane kind of spot.
It's supposed to be a normal night out.
Exactly. But then their night just takes this terrifying, violent turn. A masked man appears at their car.
And the mask itself sounds like something from a nightmare, honestly. A burlap sack with crude slits cut out for eyes.
Horrifying. And he was armed. His intentions were immediately clear and brutal.
Yeah, he forced them out of the car. Hollis was savagely beaten with the gun itself, got severe skull fractures.
Terrible. And Larry's experience was even worse. She was sexually assaulted with the barrel of the gun. It's frankly amazing they both survived.
It really is. But what's striking, even right after this awful trauma, is how their descriptions of the attacker differed.
Right. Larray thought he was a light-skinned African-American man.
But Hollis described him as a tan white man, though they both agreed he was tall, about 6 feet.
Yeah, they agreed on the height. That initial discrepancy, though, it really highlights a problem for the investigators from the get-go, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Eyewitness testimony, especially after trauma, it can be unreliable. This sort of fog of uncertainty just made a tough case even tougher right from the start.
And then, just about a month later, the terror returns. But this time, it's fatal.
March 24th. Another young couple, Richard Griffin and Pollyann Moore, found on another one of those isolated back roads in Bowie County.
And tragically, both had been shot, back of the head, with a .32 revolver.
The crime scene painted a pretty grim picture. Blood stains on the ground suggested they were probably killed outside Griffin's car.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then their bodies were put back inside. There was blood on the running board, seeped under the door. They found a spent .32 shell nearby, too.
Awful. There was a rumor about Pollyann Moore, too, wasn't there?
Yeah, a local rumor started that she'd also been sexually assaulted. But our sources, the Encyclopedia and Wikipedia, they actually refute that.
Okay.
It just shows how fast misinformation can spread, especially when a community is gripped by that kind of fear and confusion.
And it didn't stop there. Just a few weeks later, he strikes again.
With devastating results this time. April 14th, 2 teenagers, Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker, found dead in Spring Lake Park over on the Texas side of Texarkana.
And the weapon.
Same again, a .32 pistol. Their bodies were found a little ways away from their car.
And the details around Betty Jo Booker's body,
Mm-hmm.
they were particularly disturbing, weren't they?
Yeah, really chilling. And it hints at something more calculated. Her body was found lying on its back behind a tree, fully clothed, but her right hand had been deliberately put inside the pocket of her buttoned overcoat. It just suggests something beyond random violence.
And this second double murder, that must have just sent fear levels through the roof.
Oh, completely. These were teenagers. And Betty Jo Booker especially, she was, the picture of wholesomeness, popular high school junior, sorority band officer, even a former Little Miss Texarkana.
Her death must have hit the community hard.
Profoundly. Her high school actually suspended classes early so hundreds of students could go to the funerals.
Wow.
And it was really at this point, with everyone realizing, okay, this looks like a serial predator, that the local paper started calling him the Phantom Killer.
The Phantom Killer. That's when the name stuck.
Yeah. And they brought in a curfew for businesses, trying to keep people off the streets after dark.
But then the pattern changed. Dramatically.
Terrifyingly, yeah. May 3rd. The target wasn't a car on a lover's lane anymore. It was an isolated farmhouse. Miller County, Arkansas this time.
Virgil Starks. He was just sitting in his armchair reading the paper.
And he was shot. Twice. Back of the head, through a closed window.
And the weapon was different this time.
It was a .22 pistol, not the .32, which initially caused some, hesitation.
Right. But his wife, Katie Starks.
She heard the shots, went to call for help, and she was shot too. Twice in the face, from the same window.
Oh my God.
Incredibly, despite those horrific injuries, she survived, managed to run to a neighbor's house for help.
Just incredible resilience. But what linked this attack, despite the different gun?
Tire tracks. That was crucial. Investigators found tire tracks at the Starks farmhouse.
Okay.
That seemed really similar to tracks found at the scenes of the earlier double murders. Like fingerprints for cars, the tread patterns, the wear.
So that strongly suggested it was the same person, the Phantom.
Exactly. And understandably, this attack just sent Texarkana into absolute panic mode, total overdrive.
People must have been terrified.
Arming themselves, locking themselves in, barricading doors and windows after dark. The phrase dreading sundown really captured it.
Yeah, that Texas Monthly article uses that phrase. It paints such a vivid picture of the fear.
Absolutely. And you had law enforcement pouring in from both states, Arkansas State Police, Texas Rangers, including the famous Manuel Lone Wolf Gonzalez.
Lone Wolf Gonzalez, quite the character.
Definitely. And a ton of national media descended too, which kind of added to the chaos while also bringing attention to the case.
And that's when the media really started calling them the Moonlight Murders, right?
That's right. That term became widespread around this time.
So the investigations that followed, huge effort, obviously. Local police, state police, even the FBI got involved.
Massive undertaking. But the intense public fear and all the rumors flying around actually became a major hurdle. It made getting reliable information really difficult.
I can imagine. People seeing shadows everywhere.
Exactly. Gonzalez, the Texas Ranger, actually felt he needed to hold a press conference just to try and shoot down some of the wildest rumors that were wasting investigators' time.
So what were people doing? The sources mentioned extreme measures.
Oh yeah. Triple locking doors, windows, buying up every gun and bullet they could find, boarding up windows. I mean, the town essentially armed itself.
Which, paradoxically, probably made Texarkana even more dangerous in some ways.
You got it. A whole community on edge, armed, scared. Not a good mix. And that fear started spreading to nearby towns, too.
And you mentioned the initial hesitation about the Starks murder because of the .22 pistol.
Right, but those similar tire tracks were the key piece that linked it for investigators.
Okay, and rewards were offered.
Yeah, rewards were put up for information. Led to a flood of tips, but sadly, most of them turned out to be false leads, just added to the frustration.
Let's talk more about this figure, the Phantom Killer. We know the nickname came from the local papers after the Booker and Martin murders.
Texarkana Daily News, Texarkana Gazette, yeah. They really ran with that moniker.
And the description, based mostly on that first attack on Hollis and Larry.
Tall man, about 6 feet, wearing that awful white mask, just eye holes cut out. And while Hollis and Larry disagreed on his race,
the mask itself was the terrifying part. Made him seem almost inhuman.
Definitely amplified the terror, the unknown.
And his method, his M.O., attacking young couples in secluded spots, weekend nights, initially with that .32 gun.
Until the Starks murder, which was the big deviation location, weapon changed to a .22, but the tire tracks linked it. And there was that unnerving pattern too, right? About 3 weeks between attacks.
Yeah, like clockwork almost. Chilling. Did investigators try to profile him back then?
They did. Gonzalez called him a shrewd criminal, very careful about hiding his identity. Another investigator said he was cunning, would stop at nothing to avoid getting caught.
And there was a psychologist involved, Dr. LaPolla.
Yeah, Dr. Anthony LaPolla from the Federal Correctional Institution there in Texarkana. He had some interesting theories based on what they knew.
What did he think?
He believed it was definitely one person responsible for all 5 murders. He thought the killer was probably older, maybe mid-30s to 50s.
Okay.
And driven by a powerful mix of sex drive and sadism.
Wow. So not necessarily some random lunatic, but someone with specific dark motivations.
Exactly. LaPolla's view offers this really chilling insight, suggesting this wasn't someone obviously disturbed, but potentially someone leading a normal life, hiding in plain sight.
That's terrifying.
LaPolla thought he was intelligent, clever, shrewd, maybe wouldn't ever be caught. He even saw the shift to the Starks farmhouse as the killer adapting.
Because the police were watching the lovers' lanes more closely?
Precisely. He thought the killer knew about the increased patrols and changed tactics. LaPaula also speculated he might not even be local, despite knowing the back roads so well.
So many theories. But they zeroed in on one main suspect eventually, didn't they? Ewell Swinney.
Yes, Ewell Swinney. He definitely became the prime suspect. He already had a pretty long rap sheet: car theft, counterfeiting, burglary, assault, a repeat offender.
And what first pointed the finger at him? How did he get connected?
That connection came from an Arkansas lawman, Max Tockett. He noticed this pattern. Before each murder, a car was reported stolen nearby and then abandoned near the crime scene.
Interesting. So Tockett saw a potential link between the car thefts and the murders.
Right. And that led police, in July 1946, to stake out a suspected stolen car. They encountered a woman named Peggy who said she was Swinney's girlfriend. She later married him.
And she talked.
Oh, she talked a lot. Her initial confession was incredibly detailed. She directly implicated Swinney in the Booker and Martin murders.
Really? What kind of details?
Details about the crimes that hadn't been released to the public, stuff only the killer or someone close to him would likely know. It seemed like a massive breakthrough.
Wow. So what other evidence did they have against him?
Well, the circumstantial evidence started piling up. He was caught with a stolen car, obviously. When arrested, he apparently made some vague comments suggesting he was wanted for more than just car theft.
Like he knew they were onto him for something bigger.
Maybe. Investigators also found a work shirt in his room with a unique laundry mark and some slag, industrial byproduct, which the Texas Monthly piece suggests might have linked him somehow to the Stark scene, maybe where Virgil worked or something found there.
Okay. Circumstantial links.
And they learned he'd recently sold a .32 caliber pistol, the same caliber used in the first 4 murders.
That seems pretty significant. So with the confession and all this evidence, why wasn't he charged with murder?
Well, here's the twist. Peggy, his girlfriend turned wife, she abruptly recanted her entire confession, just took it all back.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Authorities then considered her an unreliable witness. And crucially, because she was now his wife, legally she couldn't be forced to testify against him in court.
So the star witness, the detailed confession, gone.
Exactly. It gutted the potential prosecution case for the murders.
So despite everything pointing towards him.
Despite the leads, the circumstantial evidence, Ewell Swinney was never formally charged with any of the Moonlight murders.
But he did go to prison.
Yes, he was eventually tried and got life in prison, but as a habitual offender based on his long history of car theft.
So locked up for life, but not for the murders.
Correct. Some people speculate it was like an unspoken deal, life for car theft instead of facing a potential death sentence for murder. But there's no official record of that.
And even his death is apparently a bit murky. Conflicting reports.
Yeah, adding another layer of uncertainty to his story.
Swinney was the main guy, but there were other suspects looked at too, right? The investigation wasn't solely focused on him.
Oh, definitely. A number of other names popped up. There was a university student, Duty Tennyson.
Right, he died by suicide and left a confession.
He did, but police couldn't find anything to actually corroborate it to link him to the crimes, so ultimately dismissed.
Okay, who else?
There was Ralph Bauman, a former airman claiming amnesia, worried he might be the killer, but his story had inconsistencies.
And the saxophone peddler. That one sounds odd.
Yeah, that was strange. Showed up trying to sell a sax around the time Betty Jo Bookers went missing. He had bloody clothes, too.
Sounds suspicious.
It did, but he was eventually cleared. Booker's sax turned up months later anyway, just adding to the weirdness.
Any others?
Well, briefly, an escaped German POW who was loose in the area, an unidentified hitchhiker who supposedly bragged about the murders.
Well,
A guy from Atoka County with a violent past, but he had an alibi for the Starks murder, and a local known as Sammy, whose tire tracks were found near a victim.
what happened with him?
He failed a polygraph, but apparently it was because he was trying to hide an affair. He was cleared too.
And wasn't there someone found dead on train tracks?
McSpadden. Roe McSpadden, yeah. Found dead on the tracks. Led to local talk. Was he maybe a 6th victim? Or was he the Phantom himself who took his own life? Pure speculation, though.
Just more unanswered questions. But even without a conviction, these murders have had a huge cultural impact, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of amazing how this unsolved case just lodged itself in the public consciousness. It's even cited as possibly inspiring the whole Hookman urban legend.
Really? the hook man. But there wasn't actually a hook involved in Texarkana.
No, not at all. Which makes it even more interesting, right? It shows how these terrifying unsolved events can morph into these broader cautionary tales, tapping into our collective fears about lovers' lanes and unknown attackers.
And then there are the movies, of course. The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
The 1976 original, yeah. Hugely influential in bringing the story, albeit a very fictionalized version, to a wider audience.
And they even remade it in 2014. Shows the story still has legs.
Definitely. And Texarkana itself still engages with this history. They do annual screenings of the original movie, believe it or not.
Yeah.
There's even a Phantom Ball charity event.
Wow. A complex relationship with its past, for sure.
And countless books, fiction and nonfiction TV shows.
Yeah.
They all keep digging into it.
That Texas Monthly author, James Presley. He had a personal connection, didn't he?
He did. His uncle was actually the Bowie County Sheriff back in 1946.
No way.
Yeah, and Presley did massive research, wrote a whole book, and he became firmly convinced that Yule Swinney was the Phantom Killer.
Despite Swinney never being charged.
Despite that, Presley lays out his case very compellingly. But ultimately, it remains officially unsolved, an enduring, unsettling mystery for Texarkana.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what really sticks with you? What are the key takeaways?
For me, it's just that raw, paralyzing fear that gripped an entire community for 10 weeks. The idea of this shadowy phantom killer striking seemingly at random, first couples, then a family in their own home. It's deeply disturbing.
Yeah, the randomness or seeming randomness.
And then, of course, Yule Swinney, the prime suspect, loads of circumstantial evidence, that initial confession. But he always stayed just beyond the reach of a murder conviction. So many lingering questions around him.
The aha moment for me, I think, is seeing how everything kind of conspired against solving it. You had the intense community fear, which clouds everything, breeds rumors, makes witnesses maybe hesitant.
Right, hinders the investigation.
And the investigation itself, despite being massive, faced challenges, those conflicting initial descriptions, the unreliable witness testimony later on, maybe some flawed assumptions early. It all added up.
Yeah, a perfect storm of factors almost.
This whole deep dive leaves me thinking about these kinds of long unsolved cases. Decades pass, people involved are gone, but the questions remain. What does this Texarkana story really tell us about? I don't know how fear can shatter a community's sense of safety.
And maybe the limits of investigation, even with significant resources.
Exactly, and the haunting power of violence that never gets fully resolved. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is real closure ever possible in a case like this, when the definitive answers just aren't there? Maybe exploring the movies or books it inspired is the closest we get.